The community behind MakerDAO, the largest decentralized lending protocol, rejecting CoinShares' proposal to invest up to $500 million in bonds. MakerDAO previously approved a plan to invest $1.6 billion with Coinbase Prime for an annual yield of 1.5%. Joining us now to discuss is Rune Christensen. He's the founder of MakerDAO. Rune, great to have you on the show. So first of all, what was your position in this proposal, and why did the community reject that $500 million investment in bonds?
Yeah, it's interesting to look at a proposal list and really it helps illustrate really the fundamental challenge with DAOs and DeFi governance, which is that the number one thing to consider is always complexity, and sort of the scarcest resource is attention and kind of the specialized knowledge necessary to make decisions. Because that's the whole thing with the DAO, right? It's not run by a CEO or a board of directors. It's more kind of average people or anonymous, shadowy supercoders or whatever it is that are active in the community. And so my point is that I'm actually not even very familiar with the CoinShares deal because there are just so many proposals coming through to Maker, and ultimately, I think that's sort of the answer here is that this is as I understand it, this proposal was a completely new form of real asset that we hadn't seen before, right? It was trying to do a sort of a first of a kind financial tokenization innovation. And yeah, I mean, in my experience, whenever people are trying to do that, it takes a very long time to get to the point where the voters and the community gets comfortable with it.
Okay, so I guess the follow-up to that would be, banks are offering 4% yield. So how is MakerDAO, other decentralized finance protocols, competing with that? And I also see another proposal, MakerDAO is voting on hiking DAI stablecoin rewards.
Yeah, so actually, Maker is one of the few projects in crypto, I guess, that loves a good bear market, because we like to build and we like to take things slow. And after sort of the rush of the bull, we finally, I think, started to find our stride, and especially finally got to the point where we can really begin to deploy into real assets. So I think there's so first of all, there's this whole story of the 4% yields on short-term treasuries, for instance, right? That means there's now a really good opportunity to generate sort of easy yield if you have cash, which Maker is lucky enough to have. And the point we've gotten to with real assets is we have some very, I would say, relatively simple, scalable structures that are well understood by many different sort of groups and parties in the core governance community of Maker. And one type of structure is what we call the MIP65-like structure, which is, it's in operation right now with MIP65, but there's also other proposals and other companies that are aiming to make sort of similar proposals that, as much as possible, basically do the same thing, because that's what we like, right? We like stuff that we understand well enough to have people vote on it. The downside with getting the kind of yield you get from something like MIP65, right, just government bond ETFs, is that it's not very liquid. So you have to think about ALM, asset liability management, right? As we kind of just saw in crypto, right? It's very important to be able to, give people their money when they want their money. And this is kind of actually just, I guess, what banking is all about. And we're sort of slowly learning all the lessons that the traditional financial system went through hundreds of years, right? The other interesting real asset that's being deployed right now is, or that we're sort of getting yield from right now, is GUSD, right? So that's an example of a very liquid real asset collateral that Maker is using that's getting a much smaller yield. So that's only 1.25%. But we also consider that simple and scalable because it's a centralized stablecoin that we're familiar with. And the great thing about it is that we're getting the yield on this, and we would always, that GUSD is ready to basically exchange for DAI at any time, and in that sense, not putting any risk at the DAI peg in the short term. So I think this in total, we've got more than $1 billion of yield generating real assets right now. And I think, we're racing towards getting a yield on all of it, right? There's no reason to have idle capital sitting around when rates are so high. Exactly to the point about, what are we going to do to prevent the outflows of capital out of crypto and into the traditional finance when the rates are much better there? And basically, that's why we are activating the DAI savings rate in Maker, right? We need to, it's time to basically generate yields through real assets and other opportunities, and even, of course, the traditional on-chain model of collateralized vaults, and then pass that on to the users in order to keep growing the ecosystem and compete and deliver a good product.
Rune, real quick, because we're running out of time, but I just want to get your take on just what's going on. What do you think is going to be the most practical impact of the whole FTX implosion for DeFi and for crypto? What do you think is actually going to change after this?
I think definitely a lot less interest and kind of, brand damage has occurred, right? I think it's going to be very quiet. But like I said, that's kind of what we like in Maker, actually, that there's some time to think and be patient and just build without too much hype, too much rush. In Maker, we are undergoing this big transition to what we call the end game, which is basically the idea of finally setting up the protocol into something that's a bit more stable and where decision-making and sort of risk management is as simple as possible so that we can really prepare for the long run, right? Because crypto is definitely not over or anything like that. This is just kind of the ups and downs of the very early growth and innovation phase.